My husband ignores my calls while I'm in labor, so we tell him I died in childbirth. My husband and I got into a fight prior to my daughter's birth a week ago when he casually suggested a paternity test for our daughter when she was born. To be clear, this was completely out of the blue with no wanting or reason. I'm a homebody who works remotely with no male friends other than my brother. I told him he was accusing me of infidelity and he said he just wanted to be sure, and kept bringing it up until I told him I didn't want to talk to him and left to my brother's house, after 3 days of him asking and the stress starting to make me physically ill. I called him while I was gone and tried to work it out, but he refused. After all of this, I went home the next day to grab some things while he was at work and I went into labor. I called him 16 times, before calling my brother, who called him another half dozen times himself while on the way to pick me up and then on the way to the hospital. It was a horrible and traumatic birth. I started crowning in the car, and the doctor delivered my baby in the back of my brother's van because I was too far along to move me, before rushing me in when I kept bleeding. It was horrible. I hated all of it. My brother's wife, who was a nurse, even told me she honestly thought I wouldn't make it. I also opted for a hysterectomy, as it came to that or something more dangerous. I only ever wanted one or none in terms of children, but my husband wants a large family. I'm trying to bond with my daughter, but it's been hard. The point is that during this, while I was returning from surgery, 10 hours after I called him, my husband finally responded and asked why I hadn't answered his call. However, my brother had my phone and was so angry that he said, "This is brother's name. I'm at the hospital. She didn't make it," and turned the phone off. My husband rushed over and got there when I'd just woken up and started shouting until the security forced him out. And then he didn't get to see our daughter until the next day because I was mostly asleep and they needed my signature to allow him back. My sister-in-law thinks it was horribly cruel but that he deserved it. But my brother stands by his prank and says that he only gave my husband 10 minutes of the same fear that he'd felt at my side for more than 10 hours. Whenever he sees my husband, he also keeps telling him that I nearly died because we waited for him. My brother used to be mostly indifferent to my husband, but now he absolutely hates him. You can see it in his face whenever my husband enters the room. And he's been visiting a lot because he doesn't trust my husband to care for me while I'm still healing. My husband is furious that my brother won't apologize and that I won't make him, and yelled at me when I said that the only reason my brother had my phone was because he wasn't there. I'm trying to be empathetic. I know he feels guilty. I've spoken to my therapist and she says the apathy I'm feeling is likely general and not solely focused on him from lingering shock from the trauma, but didn't say much about the prank. My mother-in-law has been texting me to say that my family is horribly cruel for the prank and that I should go no contact with my brother, and now my husband is saying the same. I just don't know what to do. I'm not in a good headspace, it's been hard to be in the same room with my husband, and I've been sleeping in the guest room with my daughter. He brought up the paternity test once, and I just exhaustedly told him to either get out of my face or go stay with his mum if he's planning on stressing me out even more. I really don't feel myself, and yes, I'm taking the likelihood of postpartum depression seriously, and my therapist who suggested it may be PTSD as well. Okay, so update. I don't think this will be something we can come back from. I just don't think I'll be able to heal with my husband because there's no way he didn't know it was me calling. And he still hasn't told me why he didn't answer. I know I thought I wouldn't decide right away, but I don't actually want to forget how terrible it was waiting on him, thinking he couldn't possibly leave me like that no matter how angry he was. I took the time to think of that moment before it all went down, and just how grossly betrayed and scared and alone I felt while the contractions were hitting, and I was on my knees trying to catch my breath through the pain, while waiting on the phone while it rang. And I just don't think there's any coming back from that. I wouldn't want my daughter thinking it's okay to stay with the man who destroyed her trust that way either. I'll be contacting an attorney and I'll be meeting with them in the coming weeks. We had a prenup, so it hopefully won't be too hellish, I hope. I feel like this situation became even clearer when my friend asked me if I'd still trust him as the one to sign off on my medical papers, and the reaction to that idea was visceral. I wouldn't, and I'd want him to get off that legality as soon as possible, in fact. There are roommates I had in college that I would have trusted more. I would have never ignored so many calls from him consecutively unless I'd told him expressly that I was unavailable at a specific time, and even then. I feel good with my brother and sister-in-law here with me, especially so with her being a nurse and having been there through the birth. It's really helped us bond in a way that we'd never really had time to do before. I've also finally told my old friends about the baby, and they're alternating to come and help me out for the next little while. None of this even touched the paternity test, but I'll get it for the proceedings, I guess. So I guess he'll get what he wanted. Anyway, I'm safe and well, and my daughter is healthy and happy as a peach, and pretty much an angel who's happy to sleep peacefully anywhere and took to feeding with ease, which is such a blessing since everything still hurts. Just making this decision has taken an odd weight off my shoulders, and my sister-in-law has really been helping us bond. Anyway, thank you for letting me write this out. I'm not good at diaries or journals, but writing to people feels different, and it's actually brilliant for the clarity of the situation. Even my therapist said that I seemed clearer and calmer. I might try a diary again, as she suggested. I do feel rather strongly about a man who would put spite over another person's well-being when they know that they're in a vulnerable position, as a reason not to have a child rely on them. I never thought I'd be saying that, because I married this guy, but I think anyone that's had an unreliable partner should be aware of such for their children. It's not my intention to keep him from her. So, to summarize, he popped the paternity test question on me with no reason. We fought for a couple of days before I went to my brother's. I was within 2 weeks of my due date. Went into labor at our house. I called him 16 times, brother called him 7 to 9 more, and he didn't answer. My brother had to pick me up. Had a traumatic birth, kept bleeding, was lucky to be conscious enough to sign myself in to get a hysterectomy when things went wrong. Nearly died. Husband contacted me 10 or more hours later and was unapologetic. He's mentioned the paternity test again in the week since, and still hasn't told me why he didn't answer. I'll now be going forward with divorcing him as I no longer trust him as a partner. We do have a prenup, me with my house and my business, and him with money from his family. I do intend on filing for full custody, as I think his reaction, whether spiteful or not, was dangerous, and as a father, missing more than 23 calls in a row could be a life and death situation. Is it always worth investigating infidelity in divorces if it's suspected? And do any divorce lawyers find all of this seemingly suspicious in their opinions? I'll be contacting my lawyer this week, and I'll likely be getting the paternity test for the divorce. So, yeah, I don't think any reasonable bystander would decide that you were the jerk here, even trying to take author bias into account. The fact that he could get into such a violent and disruptive state after you didn't answer one call, after him not answering you for that long, says everything, especially after such an ordeal of a birth. The guy has no empathy and doesn't seem to trust you. What your brother did was kind of a jerk move, but also motivated by what it sounds like it was a good deal of love for you and horrible stress. So honestly, I say we give him a whack on the wrist and let him be. The fact that your sister-in-law ultimately seemed to side with you speaks volumes about even his family knowing that he's not a stable guy. I hope that you come through all of this relatively unscathed legally, and you can give your daughter the great upbringing she deserves. Mom doubled her salary by getting a new job, and her old boss is losing his mind. My mom has worked for a small construction company for about 10 years and hasn't gotten any raise other than the occasional large bonus. She asked and her boss said no, even though he's personally filthy rich and she keeps the company afloat. She just applied to a larger construction company, and with her amazing experience, even though she lacked the educational prerequisites, she blew through all 3 interviews and already has a job offer within a couple of weeks of beginning her search. The new company offered her much more than she even asked for. Twice her current salary, $50K to $100K in 2 weeks, including great benefits. She broke the news to her old boss, and he started acting so desperate, panicked, and crazy that it emotionally disturbed her. He tried to make her a bunch of offers and promises she knew he wouldn't keep. He offered to pay her more than the new company offered her. He point-blank told her, "I haven't been paying you the value you're worth to me." What a fricking slap in the face. I'm so glad she's leaving and said no to old boy's offer. After all these years of loyalty and struggling financially as a single mum right in front of him, he admits that he was doing it on purpose? Truck him. Small businesses don't automatically equal better businesses, folks. Another fun detail about the old workplace. I think one of the final straws this year was the boss hiring his constantly relapsing into substance addiction and totaling cars grown man of a son into the company in order to teach him financial responsibility. The son is very stupid and has no experience. Boss man told my mom it was now an additional job responsibility to teach the son how to work at the company. Whatever he was paying his son, he could have given to my mom as a raise, but he chose to keep it in his stupid family. Piece of crap. Oh boy. As much as a red flag as the rest of the story was about the workplace, that last detail was really the final nail in the jerk coffin for the boss. Hello, underpaid, struggling employee. This is my useless son who's not earned the position. Would you mind also running the company for him at absolutely no extra compensation to yourself? Thank you muchly. Yeah, I wonder if after so much time there, whether your mother was one of those absolutely essential employees who everyone else had come to completely rely on, and whose absence made the place tailspin into complete chaos when she left. His jerkery aside, you should never have just one employee who'll completely destroy the company if they leave. It's bad business. The knowledge that she and her expertise were worth double what she was being paid, and that she had missed that many years of additional compensation must have been infuriating. I hope she's thriving now. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for not sharing any family news with my son growing up because he'd tell my ex everything, resulting in legal issues? My son grew up living with both my ex-wife and myself. My ex is extremely high conflict and, due to her job as a lawyer, used the courts to inflict as much damage on my life as she could, which I never did understand because she pushed for the divorce and claimed to have lost feelings for me. So naturally, I avoided sharing any details with her and usually gave one-word text replies for things involving our son. This worked until my son turned 11, and I found that my son was telling my ex everything he was hearing in our home, even recording videos and sending them to her. This continued even after therapy with my son and explaining to him how damaging oversharing was. After wasting thousands of dollars for a pointless legal fight that was started purely because of my son's spying, my current wife and I made the decision to no longer share any information with him that could potentially cause issues. The therapist had suggested this approach. And unfortunately, this meant we kept all news of any promotions, vacation plans, and extended family issues from my son. He only found out about trips while he was on the way to them. This continued until my son turned 19 and my ex remarried, removing me from her focus. My son is now 20 and has found out that we purposely did this for most of his childhood, and he's furious. He says we treated him as an outsider. I apologized profusely, as did my wife. We tried to explain why we did what he did, but he's refusing to give me a chance to resolve this. He's gone on a tirade to my parents and siblings and called me a negligent parent. He also told my ex, and my ex is now suing me for something completely unrelated and has no standing, but I'll be wasting thousands on a lawyer anyway, which is exactly what she wants. Am I the jerk? Christ. When people say they hate lawyers, people like this lady are the reason why. And we only have his side of things, and we don't know her grievances with him. But she is actively trying to destroy his life rather than focus on co-parenting. We've read a lot of other stories here on the channel about people with actual monsters for exes who have much healthier goals of just raising their kids, maybe getting sole custody if the ex is that bad. The ex-wife is just trying to ruin the author and actively using her kid as an agent to do so. Regardless of whether he's a jerk or not, the ex-wife is. I hope the son one day realizes how badly he's been used, and that maybe the husband can get a good lawyer and get her done for ethical violations or a harassment suit against her. What a messy situation. Am I the jerk for kicking my sister out of our family dinner after she made a practical observation? My friend Fred and his wife Sarah are not very financially stable, so it was a bit of a surprise for my sister Katie and I when they announced that they were pregnant. However, we kept it to ourselves. A few months ago, Katie planned a family trip. Brother and sister-in-law decided to opt out as they were cutting costs for the baby. At this, Mum and Dad decided to cancel the trip altogether and have another one later, since Mum's health wasn't too great either. This greatly irked Katie as she was really looking forward to the trip and made some very unsubtle remarks that Fred and Sarah shouldn't be having kids if they don't have money. Unfortunately, due to several complications, the baby didn't make it. It's been a month, and my brother and sister-in-law are understandably still devastated. Especially my sister-in-law's mental health is not very well as of now. Yesterday, I hosted a little family dinner at my home with sister, brother, sister-in-law, and our parents. Sometime before dinner, sister-in-law went to the bathroom, and meanwhile, my husband asked Fred if she was doing well. Before Fred could reply, Katie jumped in and said, "Well, though the loss is very sad, think of this as a good thing. At least you don't have to worry about money anymore. As I said, you shouldn't be bringing kids into this world unless you're sure you can provide for them." Fred went red-faced and said that they would have been able to provide for their child. They may not have money for extra luxuries, but they'd do everything for their kid. He was almost crying and purple with anger, so I quickly dragged Katie away to the kitchen and demanded to know what had possessed her to say something so insensitive. She got incredibly defensive and said that she had made a very practical observation and she was 100% correct. It was better to see straight than be clouded by emotions. By that time, Sarah had come out of the bathroom and was shocked to see Fred in tears. She kept on getting hysterical and asking what was wrong. I knew Katie's presence would ruin things further, and I asked her to get out. She looked incredibly hurt and angry, but went out anyway. Fortunately, our parents were late and didn't have to see the whole spectacle. When they came home and found out what had happened, they were shocked and upset at Katie too, but Mum thinks that perhaps I shouldn't have kicked Katie out like this. Am I the jerk? And for some more clarity, Katie is 24, so she ought to have more maturity to know what to say. Yeah, Katie has big, "What? I'm entitled to my own opinion" energy. That's a future Karen in the making. Okay, she's only 24 and there's room for her to grow as a person. I was a jackass until my late 20s, but that doesn't preclude her from being a massive jerk at this exact moment in time. Fred and Sarah have gone through something that nobody should have to go through when they're getting excited about running a family. It's absolutely heartbreaking. What they definitely don't need is someone immediately butting in and telling them to look at the bright side of things. Do better, Katie. Am I the jerk for telling my brother that his looks aren't the reason women run from him? I, 22, have 3 older siblings, Diana, who's 43, Sebastian, 37, and Jake, who's 32. I was the surprise baby, and I'm closer to Jake than Diana or Sebastian. Now, Jake has always been interested in sports and all, training since he was 14 and going pro in college. So even at 32, he looks like a young Schwarzenegger, and I took after him because he was the sibling at home who was actively watching. I mean, I was young and desperate for interacting with my sibling, so I did a lot of needy things. I took baking classes with Diana. I watched every stupid Star Wars movie so I could talk to Sebastian, and I became the Rock at age 18 for Jake. I'm not that needy anymore. I never really talked with Sebastian. He claims the reason people, and mostly women, reject him are his looks. I mean, he's okay, a little bald, a little overweight, but also very grumpy and noisy. He thinks Jake and I are stupid because of how we look. He really doesn't have any other reason. Jake has a PhD and I'm top of my classes, but we're stupid because of muscles, apparently. I've been laughing at his disrespect and resent for years, but now that I'm a bit older, I just cut him off and move away from him. It's sad because he's my brother, and I want a relationship, but I was in an open relationship with a guy and a girl because I don't want anything serious in my 20s. And a few months ago, my girl had to pick me up from my parents' house and I introduced her to my family. The next day, she said that Sebastian sent her the most unfrickable messages on Facebook she's ever received in her life. I read it and it was quite something. He called her beautiful, he said he knew we weren't serious or official, and asked her out on a date. 20 minutes later, he asked if she was there. 10 minutes later, he asks her not to show me the text, and 10 minutes later, he spent the next 20 minutes insulting her until she blocked him. We agreed not to tell him anything because she said she didn't care, and that was all. I broke up with them and removed myself from the house. I'll be living with my parents for at least a month until I find another apartment. Sebastian is also living there, and when I went through the door, he laughed at me and called me a kicked-out Chad, and that even when I look like a little Jake, I still get broken up with, and now I know how he feels when people reject him for his looks. But it's better because my looks are the F-boy stereotype. I just rolled my eyes and said that his looks aren't the reason women run from him, but rather his creepy personality, and to remember the texts he sent to my ex a few months ago. He got red in the face, and my mum said that I was the rude one because Sebastian is already having a bad time being his age and living at home. No, Sebastian needed a wake-up call. If you've made it to 37 and being a weird clingy dude on social media for some reason isn't working out with you, then you really should try a different tactic, my dude. Maybe even a different personality altogether. He'd be a jerk just for the way he stereotypes his brothers for being muscle dudes. Despite their gains, it seems like they have a much more educated and respectful way of talking to women. And yes, I'm assuming with Jake, just because more or less anything would be a better way of doing it than Sebastian's method. Look, folks, as long as you're respectful, maybe a cold call like he tried isn't the worst thing, even though it's at the very least lame and almost never works. But you've got to realize when it's not working, cut your losses and move on. And for God's sake, don't insult people. Talk to women as friends, Seb. Educate yourself. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.